A Backyard Mystery School. That's chapter 19 of Homemade Magic. We're coming to the end of Homemade Magic. And we're coming to an end of a lot of things. We're coming to an end of this venue. I will be broadcasting from someplace else in a month or so. But anyway, and we're still looking for a place. But this is kind of interesting that we have this chapter today about a backyard mystery school, because we've been unable for the last 22 years to properly have a backyard theatrical performance in this particular location. For years and years before that, we were able to in the several places that we lived. And frankly, it's something that we've missed. And we've been able to have classes and Monday night class and be able to hold a certain of the I guess you'd say the upper level OTO type degrees here. And of course we have our I do masses of the Phoenix and things like that for classes and festivals and events and things like that. But actually, hopefully, where we're going to move to, which we don't know where that is yet, might have a little backyard for us to pick this up, and hopefully enough magical people in the area to be part of the fun. So keep your fingers crossed for us. Also, don't forget the rite or the ritual to invoke the blessings of Jupiter that's coming up on the 26th. I will again repost the link to that. If ever we needed the blessings and the influence of the great beneficent Jupiter, it's about now, and Jupiter's has just slipped back into Pisces for a while, and it'll go back and forth till the end of the year. But it might be a good astrological time to take advantage of that too. So if you would like to register for that, please don't wait till the last minute to do that. Anyway, here we are, chapter 19, Backyard Mystery School. And it's got some pictures with great captions. So I'm not sure when I should do that, but let me just start reading. It starts with an epigram from Alan Watts. In the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic religions, we think of God not only as a monarch, but as the maker of the world. And as a result of that, we look upon the world as an artifact, a sort of machine created by a great engineer. There's a different conception in India, where the world does not seem an artifact. Let me read that again. There's a different conception in India, where the world is not seen as an artifact, but as a drama. And therefore, God is not the maker and the architect of the universe, but the actor of it, and is playing all the parts at once. And this connects up with the idea of each one of us as persons, because a person is a mask, from the Latin persona, the mask worn by the actors in the Greco-Roman dramas. And that was from Alan Watts, The Essential Alan Watts. I've got another little epigram here that I inserted. It's a snippet from A Midsummer Night's Dream, where King Theseus and his new bride Hippolytus are watching an absurd homemade drama done by the clowns of the play, and it's very funny. It's technically comic relief, and the king and queen make a comment about it to themselves, between themselves. Hippolytus says, "This is the silliest stuff I have ever heard." And Theseus says, "The best of this kind are but shadows, and the worst are no worse if imagination amend them." That's from Act 5, Scene 1. There was a time when the term home theater meant the staging of an actual play in the parlor of one's own home. The vision harkens back to a quieter age before radio or television, to a genteel domesticity of Victorian little women, in painted mustaches, brandishing paper swords from atop a piano bench pirate ship. A time when even grown-ups knew how to pretend, and were not afraid to put on silly hats and be a king or a queen or a villain for an evening. Such magic penetrates deeper into our genetic history than the 19th century. All magic started as drama, and all drama started in the home. Constance and I have been turning our home into a theater since 1978. The OTO degree initiation ceremonies and Gnostic masses are fully costumed and elaborate affairs, sometimes requiring several rooms, furnishings with heavy, custom-made pieces of equipment and paraphernalia. In 1982, we expanded our roles as magical impresarios and added the rites of Aloysius to our playbill. Eventually, we added to our repertoire the Rite of Earth, which forms the last section of this book. Now, the Rite of Earth is something that Constance and I and Doug and Karen James and members of Haru Raha threw together to perform after the 7 series of the planetary spheres. And it's a dramatic enactment of the Rite of Persephone. And the whole thing's in this book. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to read it, but anyway. Before we look at the rite itself, I'd like to offer some practical hints as to how almost anyone can mount a rather elaborate dramatic ritual presentation in their own home or apartment. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. And it is or can be magic of the highest order. Our magical rites did not start out as magical rites at all. In fact, they started for us as an informal gathering of friends. One summer, we simply invited a dozen or so friends over to celebrate the summer solstice with a potluck dinner party in our backyard. After everyone was sated and mellow, I gave each one of our unsuspecting guests a script for Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. I made the booklets of this delightful comedy by copying them from my own old volume of Shakespeare, then printing and stapling them at work when no one was watching. I also carefully highlighted each script so it could be easily read by each individual character. I did all the work for it. You don't have to gain enlightenment on your own. I did all the work for you. We poured each actor another glass of wine and lit some torches and candles. Then I assigned each confused partner a part, and we were off. Now, I got a footnote here. Somebody needs to be the director. In Magick, it better be you. Okay. Let's see. And we were... The play. Oh, wait a second. In short order, everyone was bitten by the thespian bug, and we discovered hidden talents in our friends that we never dreamed were there. The play was a roaring success. Everyone insisted we do it again the following year. After this informal read-through production, we knew we could do even more with our wonderful friends, and for the next 12 years or so, we did quite a bit more. Well, now's a good time to look at some pictures here. There's our son Jean-Paul, who played Saul in The Rite of Saul, looking very enthused about being crucified. And there's his mother, Sister Scorpio Apophis. The day before his first day of high school, he was Saul in the backyard Rite of Saul. And afterwards, we let him carry his cross around the backyard, and people pinned money to it like it was his bar mitzvah. And he bought a bunch of CDs or video games or something with it. The next day, he made about 75 bucks. Okay. There's Constance as Mater Coeli, or however that's performed, Mother of Heaven, in the Rite of Saturn. And the caption of that reads, "Children, what is your will with me?" 1985. And this one, the Jean-Paul thing, the caption reads, "Our homemade sun god, with his mother, Scorpio Apophis, preparing for another backyard rite of Saul, 1989. This was the second or third year Jean-Paul volunteered to play the part of the martyred sun god. Looks like he's thinking of retiring the role." Okay. And finally, there's this beautiful picture of the Rite of Mars. Let's see, how can I get that so you can see it? The togas and everything in that one were just insanely beautiful. And there's Constance looking magnificent as always along the side there. As Aries looks on, Soror Scorpio crowns Mars. Note the sign of Aries and Scorpio on the thrones on either side of Mars. For this performance, Mars is played by David P. Wilson, and you may know him better as the author S. Jason Black. This was from The Rite of Mars, 1986. Okay, under the heading Outdoors. Some dramatic rituals can be presented outside, and our backyards have been the scene of many. Naturally, the weather needs to cooperate. But when it does, yard space is preferable to the cramped quarters of your living room or garage. The stage can be anywhere you want it to be, preferably in a well-lit area of the yard and easily visible to a maximum number of people. If the ritual is done in daylight hours, it is of course preferable that the audience sit in the shade. If there is no shaded area for them, set up temporary awnings or issue umbrellas. If the ceremony requires veils, and many of them do, they can be strung on wires running between trees and buildings or between simply constructed poles. Perhaps the most simple and elegant way to veil a scene is by using two robed volunteers to hold up a length of colored fabric. These two volunteers also serve as the left and right columns of the proscenium arch of your stage. Different locations and scenes can be represented by the placement of simple bits of furniture. For outdoor ceremonies, a garden bird bath can be a river, an ocean, an oasis or garden, and a garden pedestal can be a temple or a castle. Potted plants and trees can be moved around to demarcate different scenes of the rite. Finally, what about your neighbors? You, of course, will want to be good neighbors. If your neighbors can easily see and hear what's going on in your backyard, you will need to limit your events to those that are not secret, proprietary, or degree sensitive to a particular society, order, or organization. Also, if you have little or no privacy from the neighbors, it's wise not to include elements of profanity, nudity, or overly loud music. Like it or not, it's probably best to inform your neighbors in advance that you are having a gathering of friends and are going to be putting on a little homemade play. In fact, it's polite and proper that you actually invite them to the event. This can be a little scary, but chances are very slim that they will accept your invitation. And even if they do, would probably not, and even if they do, the world will probably not end if they see a well-organized and completely incomprehensible play in the neighbor's backyard. Chances are they'll just enjoy the beer. Once we got serious about mounting homemade dramatic rituals, we turned to the rites of Aloysius, which are a series of 7 ritual dramas written by Aleister Crowley, each focusing on the character and mythology of one of the 7 planetary gods of antiquity. And they're mounted in order in descending tree of life order: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, and Luna. In 1910, Crowley publicly presented the ceremonies for the first time at Caxton Hall in London, where they were generally well received. They did not spring Minerva-like and fully formed from Crowley's brain, however. They started quite demurely as an evening of homemade theater. Crowley and his disciple, Miss Leila Waddell, a professional violinist, had just enjoyed a quiet dinner at the home of a friend and volunteered to entertain their host and other guests with a little poetry and music. How genteel. Over cognac and cigars, Crowley recited one of his poems. Then Leila played her violin. Everyone seemed to enjoy the duel of verse and music, so they each did another round. Crowley observed a tangible change in consciousness in the mellow and sated audience that swung wildly depending upon the energy of the character of the particular poem or musical piece. Before the evening was over, Crowley was convinced that he had discovered the secret formula of the great mystery schools of antiquity, that theater, music, poetry, and dance could be used to profoundly alter and elevate human consciousness. He went home and immediately started to write the prototype ritual that would eventually become the Rites of Aloysius. The Rites of Aloysius are not plays per se. The action is not driven by a clearly recognizable plot. The one immediately observes that the poetry, music, and dance numbers don't always have a direct connection to the mythological theme of the rite. The primary goal of the ceremony is instead to create a specific kind of mood, a reverie or trance in the consciousness of the individual members of the audience. If you feel melancholy and depressed at the conclusion of the rite of Saturn, good. If you're happy and in a generous mood after the rite of Jupiter, good. If you're in love and a little horny after Venus, perfect. Largely due to the efforts of the newly organized OTO bodies in California, the rites of Aloysius were resurrected in the late 1970s, and our lodge mounted the entire series every year throughout most of the 80s. They were very popular and gave us the opportunity to introduce Magick and our lodge to a larger community. Everyone involved found themselves transformed in some way by the experience. In 1985, while preparing for yet another season of the rites, someone suggested that it would be nice and magically appropriate if we added at the conclusion of the series a rite of Earth for Malkuth. We've come all the way down from the supernal triad at number 3, Saturn, all the way down to the Tree of Life to Luna. So let's ground it with Malkuth in the rite of Earth. Let's see. Yes, to ground us and properly seal our efforts for the year. The myth of the earth goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone seemed like the ideal theme for such a ceremony. After all, this was the central myth of the ancient Eleusinian mysteries. So, completely ignoring my lack of talent for such things, I set to work to assemble a homemade rite of Earth. I say assemble because I did not actually need to write very much of the rite of Earth. I simply started with a classic story, which I drew from an old translation of Homer, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and then weaved in various poems and prose by Crowley that related in some way to the elements of the story. I hope that when it was all put together and performed, it would evoke the appropriate mood. At least it would actually add a traditional Eleusinian rite to the rites of Aloysius. For several years, we decorated our ancient garage as the underworld, and our groaning garage door opening served as the terrifying jaws of hell which yawned open to let Hades, me, snatch innocent Persephone, Constance, and carry her off to my underground kingdom, an act that thoroughly startled and delighted all in attendance. The rite was great fun to present and became for us a permanent epilogue to our yearly rites season. In 1989, to observe the 11th anniversary of the chartering of our lodge, I printed commemorative scripts of our rite of Earth to give out as gifts to the cast, crew, and attending Misties. That's what the audience is called, Misties. These have become somewhat of a collector's item, and it's now with the greatest pleasure that I present this rite to you. It represents, I believe, a fitting in to this little book of homemade magic, and I hope you enjoy it. And that's where we have the homemade rite of Earth. I really don't know. We'll at least talk about this rite of Earth tomorrow and read major sections of it. There's lengthy poetry and things like that, so it might not be the sexiest of my morning readings, but we'll go through it tomorrow. And then finally, we'll finish the book with the epilogue, which is called At the Gate of the New Year. I hope you've been enjoying uh, Homemade Magic. Uh, it is currently out of print, uh, but a new publisher has taken up the task. And as soon as I get myself a little settled, we will have an expanded version, a new edition, uh, with a new publisher of Homemade Magic that will be coming out later this year. So, anyway, back to house hunting and incredible stress. Wish us luck, everyone. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.